Luke 2:39 is a simplification. And that's the nicest way I could put it. It's not exactly as it's written. That after they performed all the things according to the law of the Lord, they actually went back to Bethlehem. And they stayed there for a while. That's where the wise men visited them. That's where they fled from to go into Egypt. And then when they returned, they were going to go back to Bethlehem. But as it says in Matthew, "Arise, take the young child and his mother, and come into the land of Israel." But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelled in a city called Nazareth. That is actually when they went back into Nazareth, as it says in Luke 2:39. I don't really feel comfortable saying this, but it makes sense. If it can be accepted that Luke 2:39 is simplified and it skips over a lot of stuff, which does happen in a lot of the Gospels, especially in John, he clearly says that not everything is included here because the whole earth would not be enough to fit all the books written about him. So he obviously says he left stuff out. It makes sense if we can accept that after their fulfilling of all the requirements of the law in Jerusalem, they went back to Bethlehem, then were met by the wise men, then fled into Egypt, then returned, and that's when they went into Nazareth. I'm going to go with that. It does make sense. It fits. And I am not an astronomer, but it is clear that from the use of computers, NASA has been able to track the location of the stars and the planets back in time for hundreds and thousands of years. So, if this is true, it really can't be argued that the star was over Bethlehem from the point of view of Jerusalem. And if they're following the star, then they're going right to Bethlehem. What I was guessing before can't be true, because I thought that was what happened, but it can't be true. And this guy, he lives in Israel, and he's been working on this for years. So I totally believe that he was in Jerusalem, and he was calculating that exact location. And he said, look at that. That's Bethlehem right there. So I am going to go with that, which means I'm going to have to find a way. I had already read through this one time in the Chronological Gospels, but now I'm going to have to go through it again because I don't want to use his version. He does a lot of retranslation, as you saw. He puts all the names of the cities and the names of the people in a Hebrew reading. What am I saying? I'm saying that he writes it out so that it sounds more like the Hebrew names. He doesn't translate the names, Judah, Jerusalem. He uses the Y instead of the J, which I totally understand. But I'm not going to do that because this is not a retranslation. What I'm doing is not a retranslation. It's just an ordering of everything in one timeline. And when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city Nazareth. I'm going to have to modify this. I'm probably just going to have to put this later. I stopped in that story of them in Jerusalem at 38. When it went to 39, and when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city Nazareth. Because there has to be some time for the wise men to show up in Bethlehem, I can put all of this verse up until the word returned. And I just won't say into Galilee, because that way it'll be open for interpretation that because they really did, they went back into Bethlehem. They returned, and then the very next verse that follows is actually from Matthew, the story of the wise men. But it begins, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men. Where is he that was born king of the Jews?" They talk about Bethlehem, they go into Bethlehem, so it'll be very clear. They returned, and now we're speaking about Bethlehem, that should be what is understood. They returned into Bethlehem. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside. And then after that, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And this is where I'll say it's from both. Into Galilee, came and dwelled into Galilee to their own city. These words, into Galilee to their own city Nazareth, I will keep here, because this is when they do return to Galilee. And then keep it with Matthew, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Yep, and you can jump into Luke, and the child grew and waxed strong in the Spirit. Good.
One of the most profound prophecies Yeshua fulfilled, indicating both his Davidic genealogy and his kingly role, is found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 23. And he, Yeshua, came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. This verse is not a problem. It is the answer for Jew and Gentile alike. But we must dig past the English translation to find the $10,000 answer. Several prophets declared that the Messiah would be a tzemach, a branch, but Isaiah prophesied that the tzemach would be a particular type of branch. Isaiah 11:1. There shall come forth a rod, a hoter, a living shoot out of the stem, the gazah, the cut down tree stump of Jesse, who is the father of King David. And a branch, a netzer, a specific type of branch, shall grow out of Jesse's roots, out of his shorashim. And in that day there shall be a root, a shoresh out of Jesse, which shall stand as an ensign, a banner to the people. To the root shall the Gentiles seek, and the Netzer's rest, shall be glorious. Isaiah added prophetic detail to the picture of the Messiah as the tzemach, the branch. He prophesied that the tzemach would be a very particular type of branch, a netzer. The science of horticulture distinguishes many types of branches or offshoots from a tree, which are designated by various Latin and English terms. The same is true in the Hebrew language. The word netzer indicates a shoot from an olive tree that grows out of the original root system, but springs up at a later time and somewhat distant from the original trunk. The tree may have already been cut down because of its inability to bear fruit. The branch that shoots forth out of the root of that stump of the family tree of Jesse, King David's father, will spring forth as a netzer. A netzer has absolutely nothing to do with a Nazarite vow. The Hebrew words nazir and netzer are unrelated. They just appear similar in English. The prophets tell us that the Messiah, the son of David, will be a tzemach, a branch out of the trunk of David. But Isaiah tells us that the tzemach, the messianic branch, will be a netzer. The village of Netzer in northern Israel, known in English as Nazareth, takes its name from the root word netzer. Descendants of King David originally established this village. Miriam, Mary, the daughter of Yosef ben Yaakov, of the bloodline of King David through his son Solomon, and Miriam's husband, Yosef ben Eli, of the bloodline of King David through another son, Nathan, both grew up in Netzer among near and distant relatives and a few Levites. The inhabitants of Netzer most likely settled in this area during the Greek occupation of Israel, when many Judeans fled into the Galilee region to escape persecution during the bloody reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. The residents of Netzer knew their family history and named their village in recognition of the fact that there were a shoot out of the root of the tree of Jesse, springing up at a distant place and at a later time. A village of Netzarim, the Hebrew plural of Netzer. Now it makes perfect sense for these Netzarim to travel back to their ancestral home of Bethlehem, to legally register their support for naming Octavius Augustus the father of the Roman Empire in the 25th year of his reign as Caesar, the very year of Yeshua's birth. Not one gospel writer tells the complete story of the life and ministry of the Messiah. None of them were attempting to tell the entire story. John admits that if the whole of the story were ever written, the world could not contain the scroll. But these things are written that we might assuredly know that Yeshua of Netzer is the prophet of whom Moses spoke, and the Messiah of whom the prophets prophesied. It is only by putting the prophets and the Gospels together that we see Yeshua as the Tzemach, the Netzer, the Messiah, the King, the servant, the Son of Man, the only begotten Son of God, and the Almighty Judge.